lives. As your commissioners, we have asked the Maryland Air National Guard for three things. The first being to hold town hall meetings to answer questions that residents might have about these training exercises that can occur 170 days a year, 4 hours a day at ground levels as low as 100 feet, and how they might affect our daily lives. The second thing, to actually fly the jets in the areas that they have designated at these 100-foot levels so people can experience what might become an almost daily event. Keep in mind that once these training exercises start, we will not have the ability to stop them. Third thing, because of the possible impact affecting the quality of human environment, we have requested that a neutral party other than the Maryland National Guard do a more detailed environmental impact statement that will allow the government agencies making these decisions to make the best interest or the best decisions for the interest of those people that live in these areas. So far, all of these requests have fallen on deaf ears. Steve Gibson, our county planner, will be sharing some information that will hopefully help you formulate your public comments that you can submit to the Duke MOA by May 17th, 2023. That link will be provided to you during the program and is also available on the Clinton County Government Facebook page. Tonight, after Steve's presentation, you'll be able to ask some questions through the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to answer those questions for you. Now I'll ask Commissioner Kessinger if he has any comments.
I just want everybody to know that we as county commissioners are not against the training of our military aircraft. All we are asking is the Duke MOA to work with us on some of these situations so that we can get answers. They've done an environmental study from somewhere down in Maryland or Washington, D.C. They've never been to the area, and we're concerned about our wildlife and our way of life in the northwestern part of Clinton County. And what we're trying to do tonight is give you information so that you can make an informed plea to the Maryland National Guard so that maybe we can get some of our questions answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kessinger. Commissioner Harding.
Thank you, Commissioner Snyder. I would echo the sentiments of Commissioner Kessinger, and I would also only add that I think another concern that we have is the 20 years that we have been involved with the Pennsylvania wilds and the economic impact that that has had on our very forested area, and the economic impact that it has with tourism and the folks that come into our community and our neighboring communities. And so that being one of our largest economic drivers, it is a concern. And I think that we need to be very cautious in the agreement and any kind of additional agreement that we enter into with the National Guard. So that's my personal opinion, and I will turn it back to you, Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you, Commissioner Harding. So, Mr. Gibson, at this time, then, will you take over with your presentation, please?
Thank you, Commissioner Snyder. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Just let me know if it's coming up okay. How's it look?
It doesn't look.
Not seeing it yet.
Okay.
Of course, it worked well when we practiced.
How about now?
No.
Not yet, Steve. There you go.
There you go.
All right.
Good.
Typical technical difficulties. Okay, do you have the full screen up?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to run through this presentation. It's about 18 slides. Should only take about 15, 20 minutes. I tried to mine as much useful information out of the environmental assessment that was prepared by the Maryland Air National Guard 175th Wing. At the end of the presentation, as the commissioner said, we can take some questions. The purpose of this webinar is to support and inform public. What we realized after some of the previous presentations was that the information that some of our citizens in Clinton County were basically misinformed about what the reason for this proposal was, who was proposing it. So we thought it'd be a good idea to have this webinar. So the presentation provided a brief overview of the Duke Low Altitude MOA, which is being proposed by the Maryland Air National Guard 175th Wing. That's important to keep in mind. It is not being proposed by Clinton County. It's being proposed by the Air National Guard in Maryland, just outside of Baltimore. We wanted to provide the citizens that could be impacted by the Duke Low MOA additional resources to further review the change in airspace being proposed by the Maryland Air National Guard, and encourage citizens to submit their concerns or support by completing a web page form located on the Clinton County webpage. There's a link below. If you go to our webpage, you'll see 5 yellow buttons. The center button will take you to the Duke MOA homepage for Clinton County. On that page are other presentations that were prepared by PA Wilds, one of which was prepared by Colonel Susan Beck, retired United States Air Force Colonel, which is excellent. And we also have the web page for the 175th Wing that has the actual 3-part environmental assessment. So we have to ask the question, what is the Duke MOA? The Duke MOA is an existing military operations airspace utilized to train military forces to avoid commingling with commercial airspace, and this is where military aircraft can perform air combat maneuvers that are separate from instrument flight. That means the hard turning, the dives. Its current operational altitude is 8,000 feet mean sea level to 17,000 feet mean sea level. The existing Duke MOA covers 1.4 million acres of land in north central Pennsylvania. There's been some questions as why a National Guard Air Wing in Baltimore can't just go out over the ocean and practice their maneuvers. And the reason why is that if you see the map on the right side of this slide, those polygons in red are controlled by the United States Navy over the Atlantic Ocean. You can see on the right side or left side of the map, there's the existing Duke MOA at the top of the page. You can see the label Clinton County, PA Wilds. There's the existing Evers MOA in West Virginia. Then there's the existing Farmville MOA I think it's in Virginia near the North Carolina border. Those are the only 3 areas for these inland training runs to take place. As a result, the Air National Guard had proposed creating a low altitude MOA. What is shown on the slide is the actual entirety of the low altitude MOA. And this slide shows basically the area covering Clinton County, McKean County, Potter County, and I think some of Tioga County. And the very northern part touches a little bit of the state of New York. This slide depicts a close-up of the northwestern corner of Clinton County. And what's important about this slide is after the 175th Air Wing submitted their original environmental assessment, they received a lot of comments back from the Pennsylvania Wilds, other county commissioners, the Clinton County commissioners. That added up to almost 1,000 pages of comments. So they resubmitted their environmental assessment and made some concessions about the low altitude training runs. So if you look at the map on the right side of the page, and this is from their environmental assessment. The map area hatched in red over Kettle Creek State Park and Hammersley Wild Area will have a flight altitude restriction of 1,000 feet above ground level to avoid impacts to wildlife and tourism. That's a pretty big area of Clinton County, but you can see the rest of the MOA does not have these type of altitude restrictions, other than areas such as state parks, Austin Dam, Cinnamahoney Creek, Bucktail State Park, Stormville State Park, Cherry Springs State Park, on and on. They have proposed flight altitudes of 500 feet above ground level to avoid impacts to what they indicate as sensitive areas. Night operations will not occur below 1,000 feet, but the remaining areas of the MOA can be utilized for low-level training runs, which are as low as 100 feet above ground level. Currently, the low altitude MOA, the aircraft within the low altitude MOA will consist of the A-10C Thunderbolt, which you can see on the current slide on the top. One thing that Colonel Beck brought up that was of great concern is that the A-10s are currently being decommissioned by the United States Air Force, and that there are reports that they could be fully decommissioned by 2029. And that when the A-10s become decommissioned, it is likely that the airspace of the low altitude MOA will be taken over by F-16 Fighting Falcons. The F-16 Fighting Falcons are faster and louder than the A-10Cs, which are relatively slow and quiet. And some of the charts, decibel levels, indicate that they're roughly 10 decibels higher in noise level. So one of the concerns is after the A-10s are retired, what happens to the low-level MOA? Are we going to see the same number of F-16s flying over? Are there going to be, they're going to do another environmental assessment because they're a different type of, they have a different like noise level and speed? So how do we control, or how does the federal government control these projects? According to the National Environmental Policy Act, the federal government has to perform an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement. In accordance to the National Environmental Pact, all federal agencies must make a good faith effort to look at potential environmental consequences of a proposal before making a decision. In 2021, an environmental assessment, which is a simplified desktop study, as Commissioner Kessinger pointed out, we're not sure anyone actually came up here and did any studies. Most of this was done in an office, probably in Washington or Maryland. A simplified desktop study was prepared and received approximately 1,000 pages of comments outlining concerns from citizens, local and state agencies about negative impacts to Pennsylvania wilds, in particular the impact of wildlife, tourism, and public safety. In March of this year, the original environmental assessment was revised and resubmitted by the Maryland Air National Guard with really minimal concessions to the concerns outlined in the first draft response to the original MOA. If there is a significant impact affecting the quality of human environment, a more detailed environmental impact statement is required. The EIS is a more comprehensive study for policymakers to make decisions. An EIS has not been completed. The current environmental assessment is indicating what the government calls a finding of no significant impact, or FONSI, for the proposed low altitude MOA. If the FONSI is accepted, then essentially they will start using the low altitude MOA without any further studies being required. We feel that an environmental impact statement is required because some of our concerns either weren't addressed in the revised environmental assessment or sort of glossed over in a sentence or two. So I'm going to lay out the final action and mitigation efforts proposed by the Air National Guard. And I'll go through these quickly. One, vertical limits will be defined as 100 feet above ground level to 7,999 feet above sea level. The Duke Low MOA may be activated separately from the Duke MOA or concurrently as needed to facilitate low-level training requirements. That means the military could be performing low-level altitude training flights while performing regular training flights in the higher altitude MOA. Activation times would be intermittent by notice to air missions. That's essentially a notification that at any time they could say we're coming into the area to do a flyover or training. Expected usage would be 2 hours a day, twice per day, 1 hour at a time, with no more than 6 total aircraft, approximately 170 days per year. Weekend operations will be limited to mostly Saturdays. Sundays would be non-typical. The Maryland Air National Guard is a federal entity that would not typically, outside of wartime, fly on federal holidays. Nighttime operations defined as sunset till 10 p.m. at low altitude will be limited to 1,000 feet above ground level. A surface to 6,000 mean sea level exclusion area to avoid Wellsboro Airport, Class C airspace within the eastern side of the Duke low-level MOA. There'll be no supersonic operations, no release of chaff or flares, ordnance deployment, weapons firing, infrastructure changes, or ground disturbance would be conducted in the low MOA. At 1,000 feet above ground level, floor would be implemented over sensitive areas concerned in the southern portions of the Duke Low MOA, specifically over Hammersley Wild Area, Forest H. Tutwinger National Area, and Kettle Creek State Park. A 1,000-foot overflight buffer and a half a nautical mile lateral buffer around Bald Eagle and Golden Eagle nests would be incorporated per Air Force direction. A 500-foot above ground level floor would be implemented over sensitive areas concerning remaining portions of Duke Low MOA, such as State Park, Cinnamahoning Creek, and the historical Austin Dam ruins. And lastly, a 500-foot overflight buffer would be maintained over obstacles such as radio towers, windmills, oil drilling rigs for Air Force manual. Major concerns we feel weren't fully addressed in the environmental assessment. One, noise. Noise impacts quality of life. Low-level flights produce noise levels of 110 to 120 decibels, according to the chart that's going to be on the next slide. Sudden onset of noise is not addressed in the environmental assessment. Wildlife, sudden onset of noise and vibration can impact predatory birds, startle mammals, and impact spawning of aquatic wildlife. Tourism recreation. The Pennsylvania Wilds DCNR, the Pennsylvania Game Commission, Pennsylvania Fish and Boat have collectively worked for decades to establish ecotourism, hunting and fishing below the Duke MOA, generating $1.6 billion in 2021. Public safety, the environmental assessment does not address public safety or training of emergency services. And lastly, public outreach. The Maryland Air National Guard has not responded to county requests to attend public meetings to personally outline the proposal. The next few slides, I'm just going to present a little more detailed information on some of the noise and environmental and economic tourism issues discussed in the previous slide. This noise and frequency curve is right out of the environmental assessment. If you go to section 3.2 of the environmental assessment, you can actually read for yourselves the amount of detail they put into evaluating noise. But if you look at this table, reference from the Duke Low MOA, one low-level flight will create sounds ranging from 110 to 115 decibels. See if I get my laser pointer going here. That's right about here. This is the distance from the noise, and this is the decibel level over here. So the A10s and the F15s are somewhere in this range at low altitude. The noise level of 110 to 150 decibels is consistent with hearing damage from a rock concert or having somebody scream directly into your ear. The environmental assessment does not evaluate sudden onset of noise. And I'll talk a little bit more about this. They only evaluate a 24-hour average. According to Table 2.2 of the environmental assessment, the frequency of the A-10 flights will increase from 100 annual flights to 300 annual flights per year. The EA seems to indicate that the flights will be louder and more frequent. Noise measurement. So sound is measured in terms of decibels. The environmental assessment measures an average change in sound in terms of decibel DNL, which is a complicated weighting method of measuring sound for overall day to night sound levels and doesn't account for sudden onset of sound from low altitude flyovers. So basically they take a 24-hour average of the noise levels out in the forest and maybe look at a couple minute flyover, average that over 24 hours and indicate that there's really not going to be any change in decibel levels. The environmental assessment indicates that one aircraft at low level overflight between 100 and 500 feet will range in a decibel level of 100 to 120 decibels. And that's one aircraft. You can expect that to be, I don't know if it's a logarithmic increase, but if there's up to, and they're asking to do as many as 6 aircraft at one time, this could be extremely loud if that many flew over at one time. The chart on the right of this slide indicates noise levels that are very noisy to dangerous or painful. Examples are, as I indicated the other day, the rock concert or plane taking off. Impacts on wildlife and the environment. Section 3422 of the environmental assessment goes into great detail about their desktop evaluation of wildlife. And in the end, it boiled down to bald eagles are protected under the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. Known nests are to be avoided by limiting flyovers to 1,000 feet above ground and provide a half nautical mile buffer zone. The report indicates that there are only 7 bald eagle nests in the PA wilds. And one of the requirements is they need to check in with the federal entity that tracks the eagle nests to make sure that they're avoiding them on a regular basis. Essentially, all other species are indicated in the environmental assessment to be of no concern to low-level flights, which is a little concerning because the environmental assessment goes into several other species of animals that could be impacted by the low-level flights. It indicates that there are 29 threatened and endangered mammal and bird species that live within the Duke MOA. We reached out to the Pennsylvania Game Commission, the elk program, and the Game Commission indicated that they simply don't know how the low-level flights will affect the elk herds of Pennsylvania. It's just not been studied. The environmental assessment indicates that it's not a concern due to the short span of the low flights, but then goes on to indicate within the report that they provide evidence of panic stampeding at flights below 500 feet for similar species like caribou and pronghorn sheep. Vibrations can also disturb spawning beds of fish. So the fish eggs laid in streams or in shallow waters, if they're vibrated, they can actually be vibrated apart and end up killing the fish eggs. There's actually no mention of this in the EA at all. So we think they need to take a little bit closer look to some of the other species rather than do the desktop study. The section on tourism and recreation is addressed in section 3.72 of the environmental assessment. Honestly, it really appears to minimize concerns raised by the county and the Pennsylvania wilds. The report indicates that there's a lack of published studies on impacts from MOAs on local economies. The study admits that there will be negative impacts, but they should be insignificant due to the size of the MOA. According to the environmental assessment, hunting will not be affected because the low-level flights will take place outside of prime hunting hours and avoid some weekends during the hunting seasons. The environmental assessment indicates that the MOA area is a low-income area, meaning humans low income, and that the counties have a declining population, and use this essentially as an argument to transition to low-level flights in our area. The environmental assessment appears to indicate that some of the PA Wilds and DCNR tourism income is really padded with costs associated with traveling to the PA Wilds, not spent in the PA Wilds. So I boiled this down to those 5 statements, but they do go into some detail about why it's not going to be, it's going to end up being a Fonzie or no impact to the PA, to the PA Wilds if they do a low level MO. We feel that they really didn't address how it's going to affect tourism and the income that the PA Wilds and DCNR and others have worked very hard to reestablish in northern Clinton County and Potter County and the surrounding areas. There were concerns about public safety. Section 3.6 of the environmental assessment addresses human health and safety. They indicate historically there are very low airborne mishaps with military aircraft. Pilots go through exhaustive pre-flight reviews and low-level flight training. The environmental assessment offers no opportunity to provide local first responders and departments of emergency services information or training on how to respond to a major or minor mishap. One, I guess, incorrect assumption was what happens when life flight has to enter the airspace, but it is indicated in the environmental assessment that the air traffic controllers that control the airspace of the Air National Guard, immediately upon notification of air ambulances being dispatched to the MOA, the military air traffic controllers will contact the pilots and have them evacuate the area immediately. We had some concerns about public outreach. Section 5, management actions and special procedures of the environmental assessment really doesn't address public outreach. There's been no response to date from the Maryland Air National Guard in providing additional in-person discussion on the use of proposed Duke Low Altitude MOA, despite several requests from the county commissioners and others. The environmental assessment offers the following. It gives a statement or a location to ask questions. It's basically a web page, sort of like a contact us, click a button type thing. The military safety officers would continue to utilize the MACA educational and outreach program to conduct public awareness and outreach. This is kind of distant and non-specific to the Duke MOA. And as far as we can tell, they intend to have no direct interaction with any entity located under the Duke MOA. There is some, at least in Clinton County, there's some very important energy infrastructure at the Leidy Natural Gas Storage Facility. This was brought up in a letter in the previous review, but there's no mention of in the environmental assessment of the extensive natural gas infrastructure below the MOA. The Leidy Gas Storage Facility takes Federal Energy Regulatory Commission FERC pipelines from across the United States and stores excess gas until demand reaches an annual peak for the release of stored gas. The Leidy gas fields are absolutely critical for gas storage for the East Coast of the United States. The operators of the pipelines that surround the Leidy oil fields, or the Leidy gas fields, have indicated that they use remote sound detection devices that are impacted by loud noises to alert operations of pressure relief valve malfunctions. Low-level aircraft noise may inadvertently cause a pressure release valve alarm, which could shut down a pipeline, affecting the fuel stores to major customers such as power plants. These false alarms could also trigger 911 emergency services response. As far as we can tell, there's no airspace restrictions at all over the Leidy compressors. and that low-level flights of 100 feet can take place in those areas, possibly triggering those safety valves. This second to the last slide, I just wanted to throw out there. There's quite a bit of information in here, but I'd be a little bit concerned about the environmental assessment, and it goes back to the hard work that the PA Wilds and DCNR and other the counties have done to make PA Wilds a hub of ecotourism in the eastern United States, and it essentially is the largest ecotourism location in the eastern United States. And there's some tenets of ecotourism that I borrowed off this website, ecotourism.org, which is minimize physical, social, behavioral, and psychological impacts, build environmental, cultural awareness and respect, provide positive experience for both visitors and hosts, provide direct financial benefits for conservation, generate financial benefits for both local people and private industry, deliver memorable interpretive experiences to visitors to help raise sensitivity to host countries' political, environmental, and social climates, design, construct, and operate low-impact facilities, and recognize the rights and spiritual beliefs of Indigenous people in your community and work in partnership with them to create empowerment. Essentially, constant low-level flyovers kind of go against pretty much half of those tenets. So again, it's an area of concern. So last slide, please get involved and have your friends and family get involved as well. Express your concerns, and if you want, request a full environmental impact study. Maybe suggest a way we can compromise with the Maryland Air National Guard so they can continue their training and we can continue enjoying our way of life. The responses are due by May 17th, 2023. They have to be postmarked by that date. And then the county provided a short survey where if you want to get on the county website and just click on the survey, fill out some concerns, or even provide your support of the Low Altitude MOA. Put your name on the bottom and hit submit. We will gather those up. It'll automatically be sent to our email. We will save those and we will turn all them in with the county commissioner's response. Or you can provide your own letter on your own letterhead. And that concludes the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. One thing I did want to point out before we get into some of the questions and comment that we did learn, if this airspace is opened to the Maryland Air National Guard, then it opens the airspace to training to any other air training of any other entity. So in addition to those 170 days, it can be opened beyond that. That's just the starting number of days that it could be. So once it's opened, and it could be for more than 170 days. And we believe it could be more than the 4 hours that they're talking about. So we need to keep that in mind. So Commissioner Harding, Commissioner Kessinger, do you have any comments at this time before I ask Commissioner Harding for the comments or questions?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Harding, we have questions.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's been quite active over here behind the scenes.
Good.
I do want to, excuse me, what was that?
That's a good.
Okay, so
What we're hoping for.
before I get into any of the questions that came through the chat, which was disabled until I figured out how to get that going, Mr. Langenfelder, who works for Senator Dush, he's a retired Air Force pilot with over 3,500 hours, much of it at low level, has sent a couple of attachments to me via email. He shared the letter that Senator Dush sent regarding the Duke MOA, which I do believe we have on file and we have read that. So I just want to let Doug know that we have that information. So in the chat was one of the questions was this MOA attempted in Maryland? If yes, was it granted? If it wasn't granted, do we know why?
It was turned down in Maryland and West Virginia, but we do not know why. I do not know why anyhow. I don't know if Steve or anyone else knows, but we do not know why.
They briefly touch on it in the environmental assessment, and I'm talking about briefly. There's language like, we looked at this other MOA and it's not feasible, things like that. It wasn't overly convincing.
You're muted. Okay.
Yeah, I know. It's like I'm all new at this Zoom stuff. The next question was, what is the seasonal population in Clinton County? Is it declining, steady, or increasing?
I can't give a number on that, but I've seen in northwestern Clinton County, we have picked up population because some people are retiring to that area simply for what we have. And it's not necessarily a seasonal increase there. It's people are actually buying property. Some of them have had camps there for years, and they're now moving and using that as their primary residence. So where they say it's a declining population, I don't think is 100% correct, because there are people moving into that area simply because they enjoy the outdoors, they enjoy the way of life up there, and that's what I believe. And I've talked to people from completely out of our area, a lot of them from southeastern Pennsylvania, get out of the rat race of the big city and move to northwestern Clinton County in the areas that are less populated and simply for the peace and quiet.
I would add to that we have received a few comments from retired military veterans who suffer PTSD, and there was some concern from them about the possibility of the low-flying Duke MOA. So I think that we also have some veterans in the area that were trying to escape loud noises and those types of things. So speaking on their behalf too. A comment in the chat. Thank you. I feel the only way to dispute the ANG would certainly require a controlled study with multiple people involved to take decibel and vibrational readings, observe wildlife behavior, and do follow-up studies. So that was just a comment. Another comment in the chat. Western Northern Clinton County is struggling for economic growth. Currently, ecotourism is a viable route to expand. Wildlife is not low on the list of offerings, whether it be hunting or observing. Identifying only eagles as affected wildlife seems very short-sighted. 170 days is nearly half of the year. The next question in the chat is, where does the PA National Guard train? Not sure if my fellow commissioners, I know that we discussed this at one point.
This is the Maryland Air National Guard. So I don't know if there is a Pennsylvania Air National Guard. I can't comment on that, but our National Guard across the river here, I know they go to Fort Drum and different places like that for their National Guard training, but I don't know if and where there is a PA National Guard.
The presentation by Colonel Beck, if you go to our website, talks about the other air wings that train in the Duke MOA. And I believe there is, it's not the like combat air support type jets that are out of Pennsylvania, but it's more like some cargo planes that do come into the MOA and train, but I don't think they work in the low MOA. But if you have a chance to look at Colonel Beck's presentation. It's very informative.
Thank you, Steve. Another question in the chat. What are the other affected counties saying? So I guess maybe I can take this one. We participated in a Pennsylvania Wilds webinar, which was held, I want to say about a week or so ago. Same format that we're doing here tonight with you. As Steve mentioned, there were a lot of people with experience and information and knowledge on that webinar, which is where Steve got a lot of his information. But I think all of the counties that I'm familiar with, and maybe Commissioner Snyder, Commissioner Kessinger can comment, feel the same way that we do. We don't want to come across as anti-military, but we really want to make sure that we preserve the natural resources and the things that we have to our advantage to bring people and lure people into our community and not jeopardize those things. Commissioner Snyder, did you have anything to add to that?
Not to that comment. I was researching and it looks like the answer to the last question is that they train in Fort Indian Town Gap. I Googled it and that's what I found on that. So I was trying to answer that last question. And we have not had a lot of contact with the other surrounding counties though. And I'm not sure because we can't see. We did reach out. And even though it was short notice to a couple of our sister counties and invited them to participate with us here this evening. And I don't know if anyone was able to join us, but we're certainly looking to cooperate and get some involvement from some of our sister counties on this.
So for those of you who have your hand raised, we were not going to have speaking roles in tonight's webinar. We were going to use chat so that we could sort of keep the timeline as promised to an hour. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask or comments you'd like to make, if you could please use the chat. The next comment is the gas pipelines also have another above ground infrastructure like manual shutoff valves and pipes. Has anyone assessed how big or catastrophic a fire or explosion would be if they were accidentally hit, as I believe they were not designed with this flyover situation in mind?
It would be tough to speculate, but there is a massive amount of BTUs passing through Leidy at any given day, at any given time. The pipe would be shut down after it caught on fire, but yeah, it could be a pretty big explosion and possibly put power plants out of service for a while.
Thank you, Steve. Next question. While we hope it never occurs, a flight accident is not beyond reason. Do they provide training to first responders in case of an accident? And just before I hand this back over to Steve, this is a question that we asked repeatedly on all fronts, because we are already very desperately needing first responders. And so if there was a situation, how are we as a county supposed to respond to that? So Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, in all honesty, the environmental assessment doesn't address any local interaction whatsoever with the people that live on the ground, whether it's coming to meetings, explaining how the MOA works, or providing any type of training for first responders if there was a minor or major aircraft mishap. And we feel that that's something they need to address.
Next question. Is the jet stream of these jets hot? We have trees that may be 100 feet. Won't this be a fire hazard? Also, won't there be additional pollution spewed from these jets? Our trees are suffering from many insults. Unfortunately, none of us are biologists, and this is why we want the environmental study done so that we can learn what the consequences and what the ramifications would be in the situation of having 100 feet low flying zone. Mr. Lengenfelder is sending me a lot of messages, and apparently he has a lot of information. So I'm just responding to him now, but to answer the question, we do not know the answer to that, which is all the more reason when we get to the end of this presentation to send your questions and comments that we provide to you at the end of this presentation to the public comment portion. What is the position of the PA state senators?
And Commissioner, right below that, they also want to know what is the support from our representatives. And we can tell you that we have gotten quite a bit of support, both from congressmen, and I have letters here that have been written from representatives, congressmen, senators who have supported us as commissioners in the things that we asked as county commissioners of the Maryland Air National Guard, of the three things that we asked for. And that's what were written in letters to them for the town hall meetings, for the environmental studies, and for them to do the fly patterns so that the residents of Clinton County could ask their questions, see what would be happening, and for the environmental studies. And to our knowledge, again, those requests have gone unanswered. And that's why we find this to be so frustrating.
Okay, next question is, will the flights interfere with the microwave system used to monitor the pipeline system?
I don't think we have an answer for that because we're not exactly sure how the pipeline system works.
And then the next question is, do these jets produce more pollution than the gas-fired electric plant? Oh, and then that was a smart joke, so. Okay. Who in PA is supporting this use of the PA wilds? So I guess I can start. I mean, there are a lot of people in the counties that are going to be affected that do not mind and have been very vocal about they want the Air National Guard to do whatever they need to do to be properly trained to defend our country, of which we are not denying with. But at the same time, you know, we just would like a little bit more work done before that. So I don't know if my fellow commissioners or Steve have any other comments about who in PA is supporting this use of the PA wilds.
I don't think we really know who is and who isn't, so. I've never seen anything written down that says which sides are, which people are on which side, so.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why we wanted to have the this presentation is that I think all of us have heard people just voice support that they got to do what they got to do, but I don't think they quite understand that it's going to be triple the amount of flights. It's going to be through hunting season. It's going to be only done during good weather, which is half the days of the year. So anytime the sun is out, you can pretty much know that they're going to be out there training in the MOA, you know, and how it's going to affect their recreational life that they've grown up being used to in northern Clinton County or other parts of the PA wilds.
Another comment, there needs to be a balance to help support the military. I think rather than we accept the presentation expectations, they sit down with the counties and possibly work out a more acceptable and realistic timeline for flights and amount of flights. And that's exactly why we're here today, is to help everyone who's joined this webinar an opportunity to learn how to make your comments and make your comments known to the Duke MOA. And the next question is, who currently is coming down the West Branch and what MOA covers that?
I don't think there is no MOA in the West Branch. These are just random flights that are coming in and out of the area that are affecting those particular areas. There is no MOA. The MOA is all in northwestern Clinton County, Potter County, Cameron County, parts of Tioga County, up in almost the New York State border. The rest of what you see are just planes going back and forth to those MOA areas.
And there's a chance that if and when the MOA starts, that you'll actually see more of that occurring when they're in the area.
Another question that came in through the Q&A, with the preponderance of comments that ask for evidence, why aren't the feds stepping in and asking for an NEPA?
They did. That's the environmental assessment.
Yes.
The National Environmental Policy Act is why we're here. All they provided was the environmental assessment, which is essentially a desktop study from someone sitting in an office, probably in Washington or Maryland. We think they need to take a closer look at several items to make everyone a little more comfortable.
That's all we've been asking for, but we can get no response from anyone. We're just falling on deaf ears. And that's why we're here tonight, and that's why we're asking people to get their comments in either to us or to the Maryland Air National Guard by May the 17th. That's the deadline for comments. And that's what we're trying to impress upon everyone, that we need to get this done, and we need to get it done now. We're just a little more over a week away.
Thank you, Commissioner Kessinger. I think that's a great segue into how folks that are on the webinar can access the information to make comments. So Commissioner Snyder or Steve, do you want to direct our attendees?
Yeah, Steve, do you have that to the website?
Yeah, okay, so the easiest thing to do
Get on the county
Yeah.
website.
is
Yeah,
go to
website.
clintoncountypa.gov. When you get to the Clinton County opening title web page, there's going to be 5 yellow buttons below the title block. The button in the very center says Duke MOA. If you click on that button, it will take you to a web page that the county created that just has information about the Duke MOA. So we have, we'll put this presentation on there. We have the PA Wilds presentations on there. We have the link to the 175th Air Wing Air National Guard of Maryland, which has all of their information posted on their own webpage. And then there's a link where you can fill out a fillable webpage form. You just click on we listed a bunch of concerns that we put into our presentation, and you can just click a button, whether you have these concerns, put your name in, what county you live in, and you can click submit, and it'll go to the county, a county email, where we will turn it into a PDF and add it to the county's response comments. If you want to provide a letter, you can just send it to my email, which is sgibson@clintoncountypa.gov, and we'll make sure that that gets added to the county's response as well. We try to make it easy for the general public to provide their input. And yes, there is a button that says we fully support the Duke MOA.
And again, we just believe that the residents of Clinton County have a right to have their questions answered, have a right to know what's going to be happening, how this is going to change the way that you may have your daily life affected. Because again, once this starts, our understanding is that we do not have the authority. If we can't even get them to come and talk to us now, what chance do you think we're going to have to stop it once it starts? That's our problem here. No one's talking to us now. If we have problems later and there's no communication now, what's our communications going to be later? This is a very rural county. We already have problems with EMS services. Unfortunately, you only have to listen to the news today and we hear about the tragedies of aircraft crashes. When you're talking about, and I know that these are highly trained pilots, and I pray that we never, if this happens, have an accident, but chances are we will have one sometime. And then how are we going to respond to that? So I just hope and pray that we get some type of communication so that our residents know what we're getting into, because once it's here, we've got to live with it. So that's what we're asking for, some communication, so we know what we're getting into and how it's going to affect our daily lives for now and forever. And we thank everyone who has taken the time to participate in this program this evening. I'm going to ask the commissioners for final comment. Commissioner Harding.
Thanks. I mean, we have about 3 minutes here and a couple of comments have come in, so I want to make sure that we read them. How much opposition is necessary to amend or stop this initiative?
That's the problem I have personally, is I don't think if every person in every county affected wrote a comment against it, this is the US government. They're going to do what the US government wants to do. And unfortunately, that's the way things are. And I'm just upset that they will not even talk to us and will not give us any comments on anything. And it's the US government, and I believe they're going to do what they want to do.
The next one was, does the county receive any monetary fee for granting the use? And I actually asked this question at the PA Wilds webinar. What I was told was that should there be some catastrophic event, the county may be reimbursed for the costs of whatever it required to mediate that event. But there is no financial gain from the county. There is no renting of the airspace. And once the Maryland Air National Guard are using the space, the airspace belongs to the National Guard. And then thanks to the commissioners and Steve Gibson for putting on this presentation together, very informative. So I'll turn it back over to you, Commissioner Snyder, if you want to close out.
No, we just, any further comments from the commissioners?
No, just everybody get on our webpage and get your comments in so that we can, again, get them in by May 17th. We're a little more than a week away. Whether it does any good or not, we will soon find out, but please, everybody respond. Thank you.
Yep, that was the purpose of what we tried to do here this evening. Steve, any final comments from you?
I don't have any final comments.
All right, and Steve, thank you. That was a wonderful slideshow. I think it was very informative, and that's what we were looking for. Thank you, Commissioner Harding, for your hard work in putting this together. Appreciate that very much. So thank you for all the participants. We hope you found this helpful, and please respond, if you will, with your comments by May 17th, and spread the word to your friends and neighbors. Thank you all very much for your time tonight. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you.